Welcome back to another edition of the Routine Jumper Podcast, the podcast where we talk about everything NBA basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon. It is great to be back on the platform. Unwarranted break, but we back talking about NBA action. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily NBA content. We're going to be doing a bunch of different things here on the Routine Jumper page. Make sure you hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And let's get right into it. In today's episode, we talking all about the NBA trade block. And today's episode is going to be centered around one question: cap or no cap? Easy question, hard answers to follow. Let's start off with one of the most interesting names on the trade block right now, or at least in trade conversations, and that is Charlotte Hornets All-Star guard Lamelo Ball. You have two sides of the story. One that says that Lamelo Ball is on the trade block. Lamelo Ball has suitors. The Charlotte Hornets front office is or isn't picking up phone calls from said suitors about Lamelo Ball. Then you have the other side. Lamelo Ball himself says he's not disgruntled. He's not unhappy. He wants to build with the Charlotte Hornets. He likes what his roster is doing right now in his absence. You're hearing stories from the front office that's saying we're not shopping Lamelo. We're not answering phone calls. We want to see what our team looks like fully healthy before we start to do anything irrational. Let me tell you what this most recent report from Kelly Eco says, which again does take into account that it was also stated that he was a little talking about LaMelo Ball was a little apprehensive when it came to this team moving forward because it seemed like he was starting to grow frustration with the organization and the feeling that this team is still a ways away from being a real competitor in the Eastern Conference, given that right now they're sitting around, 4-11, 4-12. So the report says league sources say the front office is increasingly hesitant about cementing Ball as a long-term foundational piece, has become disillusioned with the 24-year-old and is open to moving him. That said, other reports quickly emerged stating that the Hornets are not listening to offers and are not willing to discuss a trade for Ball right now. Charlotte understandably wants to get this team healthy and see what they have before making any moves. There will be a market for Ball, but because of concerns about his injury history, defense, and whether he is a foundational piece, the return on any trade may not be as impressive as the Hornets or their fans expect. The question, again, that will be posed throughout the podcast: cap or no cap, is LaMelo Ball enough of a trade piece to make him an untouchable? I think there's an interesting question there because I think the idea is if you think he's a foundational piece, is it built off of his playmaking ability and the fact that he's able to give you 24 to 26 points a night? You'd say no cap. I think you'd say no cap. He's a foundational piece. He's someone we can truly build around. What would make you say cap on him being a long-term piece for the Charlotte Hornets? Well, they've never been a winning organization with him. They haven't been a winning organization before him outside of a season or two with Kemba Walker, so you could point to that as being an infrastructural issue. But LaMelo Ball has done basically his cap out has been getting this team to the 10th seed in an era where now there is the in-season tournament and the play-in tournament, and getting bounced out in said in-season in said play-in tournament two different occasions. I believe both in very disheartening, clownish behavioral levels of the disrespect in terms of how they got whooped on in both games. And it makes you wonder if this team has hit its ceiling. Now, granted, Brandon Miller has missed time. I think Colin Knippel was one of those guys. I think he is one that when you look at this Rookie of the Year race right now, he is sitting at the forefront of the Rookie of the Year race. I think he's like at 33% or somewhere around there as the favorite to win Rookie of the Year as of right now, and deservedly so. We talked about Colin Knipple on this podcast, along with Ryan Kalkbrenner, who I think has been hooping, and shout out to Sion James as well, who I think has been very productive off the bench. They have a squad that is slowly but surely putting things together, and even though the record does not reflect it, the Charlotte Hornets are an embodiment of this phrasing that I like to throw around young basketball teams, where the focus is not always about making that leap. It's about taking that proper step forward to give you an understanding of what you have. And that statement is that sometimes the goal of the season is not for the record to reflect how good you are, but for the productivity to reflect that you're taking steps in the right direction. The biggest thing that the Charlotte Hornets needed to learn this season was, can they acquire, can they develop more blue chip talent? And by blue chip talent, usually that phrase is thrown out as they come from big name school, ready made out the gate, so on and so forth. I think it should be more defined as guys who connect with your system right out the gate. Guys who can play right out the gate. Guys that it doesn't matter what school they came from, what draft pick they were taken with, can they play NBA caliber basketball? And the reason why I say that is because someone like Ryan Kalkbrenner, taken in the early second round, that's somebody that would maybe not be considered a blue chip prospect the same way Colin Knipple is, but who was taken top 5. But he's providing day one starter productivity and has arguably been like a top 7, top 8, let's say top 12 to be quite frank, because again, the center position is absolutely stacked in the NBA. He's given about top 12 production starting wise at the center position so far this season, primarily on the offensive end, but it's brought some real rim protection as well to a team that, moving off of Mark Williams, did have real questions as to what their center rotation was going to look like. And Ryan Kalkbrenner has at least solidified that starting spot and hasn't had too many games where he's missed either. I think he had the birth of a child, which was part of one of the reasons that he missed, and I think another was recently like an illness. But other than that, he's been had a much cleaner bill of health so far than Mark Williams as well. So this team is trying to build. And I don't think it's one of those things where you should start to tear things down the minute you start to see any true momentum. You have Lamelo. Brandon Miller, when healthy, was looking like he had real all-star trajectory. And I think he still does. It's just about getting back on the floor. Colin Knipple looks like a guy who, even when Brandon Miller gets back, you're just going to have to start calling at the 3. You're just going to have to do it. You're going to have to start calling at the 3. You're going to have to think about the future of someone like Miles Bridges, who I think is really the guy you have to start having conversations about in terms of the trade block. What his value looks like, probably not that high, especially given the fact that his contract is not super lucrative with everything else that took place off the court that led to him not getting a longer extension deal. But I don't think LaMelo Ball is the guy that you have to dip your toe into the water when it comes to the trade market into when you're talking about trying to make a move to add depth to this team. I think another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is this team really just needs to build out the depth on their bench. I like Trey Mann at the guard spot, and I like Colin Sexton. I think is one of the most underrated pickups of this past summer in terms of what he's brought, both as a vocal leader for this team in the locker room, which has been spoken on a ton so far in the beginning of this regular season. And I think another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is the fact that this team really just needs more rim protection. I think that Ryan Kalkbrenner is somebody who, when you look at what he brings to the table, is a really good starting center in today's NBA. But beyond Ryan, if we're being honest about the center rotation, I'll pull up the depth chart just to make sure that I'm getting this fully understood. Moussa Diabate has been very productive, and I will say that much. But they're not even playing a traditional 4-man, both in their starting lineup or off the bench with Liam McNeely, who's more of a traditional 3, and maybe even in some instances at 6'7" could even be like a Klay Thompson-esque type shooting guard off the bench for them. So they play a very small bench. And they play a very small bench, and they kind of have to make up for that with the fact that Musa Diabate is just super duper active on the boards this season. I'm sure Charlotte fans are very excited about what he's bringing to the table with basically 10 and 8, 10 points, 8 rebounds, and I believe he's shooting kind of insane shooting splits if I'm not mistaken as well. He is shooting, yeah, 63.7% from the field. Again, on low volume, but somebody who has just been really productive in his minutes on the floor, averaging nearly a block and a half as well. But I think they just need to shore up that front court with somebody who's more of a traditional power forward. I don't think their issue is the backcourt at all. I think the issue is that they're very small as far as rim protection is considered. They don't have a true 7 footer outside of Ryan Kalkbrenner, I think, on the roster at all, unless we're going to count someone like Mason Plumlee. But he's somebody that shouldn't and isn't really getting real minutes on this team, which takes away from what they bring overall defensively. And it's a reason why they've kind of had to be this quote unquote like run and gun style offense. And although they can be productive with that lineup, I mean, they just struggle to defend. Lamelo Ball, not a plus defender. Conca is a competitor on the defensive end, but he's an above average defender at best. Brandon Miller, at best, an above average defender. Miles Bridges, I'm going to give him average defender at best. And then I would even say that Ryan Kalkbrenner, even with what he brings from a rim protection standpoint, I would say that he is, again, I mean, yeah, averaging nearly 2 blocks a game this season, but again, still maybe an above average center at best as far as defensive productivity is given. And then off the bench, Trey Mann, nowhere close to a plus defender. Colin Sexton, competitive on that side, but nowhere close to a plus defender. Zion James might arguably be their best defender as far as intangibles, assets, and what he brings to the table as far as being able to guard multiple positions at 6'5". He's somebody that I think has the range to guard ones and twos in space with his lateral quickness, but also has the physical capability to still maybe bar up against threes and maybe some small ball fours in certain situations. But not, I mean, that puts you at a real disadvantage when you have really, let's say, two really high level defenders, and then Musa Diabate, who does a lot of his stuff based off of athleticism more than anything. So he may be an above average defender just based off of his physical gifts. There's not a lot to work with in terms of like really adding a defensive identity to this team. And I'm not saying that they have to start, pressing guys full court, 94 feet, and things of that nature, but they have to grow a defensive backbone to make up for what they lose in having so much offensive firepower with LaMelo, with Conca, with Brandon Miller in that starting lineup. They have to either bring more defense into the starting lineup by replacing Miles Bridges with somebody at that 4 that can be a secondary rim protector behind those guys, or you need to get more defensive capable guys on the bench that can help with protecting a lead when guys like LaMelo Ball and Colin Knippel and Brandon Miller are not on the floor, or some rotation of those 3 is off the floor where maybe one of the 3 is with the second unit, but still, they need real defensive guys around them. I think this is a team that desperately needs their own version of like the Drew Holidays of the world, or Klay Thompson at the peak of his powers when he played next to Steph, where you've got that lead offensive initiator, right? Let's use the Klay Thompson to Steph Curry thing, because I think that would be the best, the quote unquote best comparison, with LaMelo Ball being the quote unquote Steph Curry, right? And you having somebody who can be this knockdown 3-point shooter, or he can be somebody that gives you another offensive contribution, but he does so in a way where also he has the upside defensively to guard on the perimeter. Then you have the Andre Iguodala of the world, or you have the Sean Livingston coming off the bench, where they just provide really solid minutes. This Charlotte Hornets team, A, is very, very young, and I think that's hurting them to a certain degree. But B, I think this team desperately needs a guy that you can legitimately stamp as a defensive stopper, whether that's a guy at the 4, or whether that's a guy that plays like the 2-3 but is able to be a true tweener positionally, where he can fit in a multitude of different lineups. That's the kind of guy that comes to mind. I think they should target a guy like Jeremy Grant, for example, who I don't necessarily know if the Portland Trailblazers are willing to move off of with the way that they're playing so far this season. Now you could say it's a crowded small forward room with Deni Avdija, and you still have a pretty large group over there in terms of what they bring at the small forward position. I would also say they're kind of guard heavy too. So overall, I think they're just depth wise, they've got a lot going on. Because if you really think about it, the Blazers they just bring so much at every position, which is why I think they could be a good trade candidate. Yeah, Tumani Kamara, Deni Avdija, Chris Murray, who they list as a 2, but I think it's still more of a traditional 3. Um, don't get me wrong, Jeremy Grant has been really solid for them, so I'll be surprised if they would want to move off of him. But I think Jeremy Grant is the kind of guy I would say that fits in the mold of what the Charlotte Hornets are missing. I don't have a list right now of other guys that would be interesting to fit. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below who you think would be a good fit on this Charlotte Hornets team to help maximize a lineup that has LaMelo Ball at the center of it all, Brandon Miller, Con Knipple, and Ryan Kalkbrenner in the middle of all of it. Maybe I think it's a small forward slash power forward, someone that's 6'7" to 6'9" that has real defensive wing capability while giving you shot making here and there, but isn't super dependent on having the ball in his hands. Somebody who can just be a real glue guy fit for this Charlotte Hornets team. I think there's somebody out there that fits the mold of it, and I think they need to focus more on that than the idea of moving off of LaMelo Ball. So if LaMelo truly isn't disgruntled, despite what reports initially stated, if Charlotte truly isn't listening on calls about LaMelo Ball, I think they do need to be listening on calls about trying to get a true veteran power forward who can add to their front court room and give them a different element of defense that they're desperately lacking, because their offense is all gas, no breaks as far as their starting lineup is considered, with the only version of real defensive capability coming from their center position in a rookie in Ryan Kalkbrenner, which, again, no disrespect to him. Him and Con Knipple have been balling this season in their respective roles. But there is a hole in the middle at that power forward position. Truly, I truly believe that Miles Bridges, even with averaging 22 points this season, I believe is the link that needs to be unchained and needs to be flipped in favor of somebody who helps bring a little bit more defense to this team. LaMelo Ball, to me, is a really interesting trade chip if he were to actually hit the market, right? I think there's a handful of teams that could be really, really interesting for LaMelo Ball. I think the Clippers trying to build a post James Harden, post Kawhi Leonard universe could really like a guy that brings excitement and above the rim capability as far as being able to have lob threats around him and things of that nature. Could make that a really exciting basketball team. Bring back shades of the Lob City Clippers, or bring back the real throwback of times with like Quentin Richardson and guys of that ilk that played on that team when things were a little bit more exciting back in the day, the Catino Mobleys and things of that nature. Bring more excitement to the new stadium, bring more excitement to a franchise that is this season dealt with the oldest roster maybe in NBA history, and infuse some real youth and a real future for this team looking forward with a centerpiece that you already know, when healthy, is a proven talent. Now, would you be biting a little bit of the Kawhi Leonard cheese in a sense by getting yet another player who has real injury concerns? Yeah, but you'd also be getting a much younger, much higher ceiling version at this point, given the fact that Kawhi Leonard is much more advanced at age as opposed to LaMelo Ball, who for the most part should have a lot more of a career ahead of him than he does behind him already. So that could be an interesting team. The Miami Heat are always going to be a team in question as far as how he would fit in a Pat Riley system, especially with how great they're playing up-tempo basketball right now. You have a real lob threat in Khalil Ware, also Bam Adebayo on the low block as well. You got real defense behind LaMelo, which makes up for his shortcomings. You still got somebody like oh my goodness. You still have oh man, I don't wanna like let it slip, because point guard. don't want to. I'm sure you guys are like screaming at me through the phone or through the computer. Davion Mitchell, man, that would have bugged me. Davion Mitchell is somebody in that backcourt that provides real defense. I'm assuming you'd still be able to keep Norman Powell in a trade. It would likely be you having to move off of Tyler Hero, who they already may have questions about as far as what they want to do with him, signing him long term to a more longer term contract as opposed to LaMelo Ball, who is already under contract for another few seasons. Like, that would be another interesting team. But you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think, cap or no cap, LaMelo Ball is a franchise caliber player? Cap or no cap? And if you think he's not, where do you think would be a good fit for him to be a lead guard if it's not staying on the Charlotte Hornets? Interested to hear what you guys have to say on that.